I am Shauna Lee Palmer Gardner. I come from Kearns, West Valley. I met my husband over at Snow College. When I was in primary, so many thousands of years ago, I learned how to crochet just 2 stitches. And all we did was learn how to take a rectangle and make slippers or hot pads. So I always knew the stitches, and occasionally I'd get some yarn and I'd try making different things, but never succeeded. Then when I was expecting Jennifer, I thought, I'm going to make a blanket. And we bought some yarn, and I did a double crochet blanket. The more complicated stitch, I thought. Well, this thing started out, this is this wide, and it will be just perfect for a baby blanket. And then as I got going, it got longer and longer. Pretty quick, it fit the whole crib. And so I'm going, one of these days I'll learn how to do this properly. Well, then I had all 4 of my kids within 5 years, and so I'm going, I guess I'll have to put this off for a while because I don't have the time. And the year after Amy Lynn was born, my youngest was born, my sister announced that she was expecting her first baby. And this is my baby sister who I've always taken care of. I got to make her something special. How can I do that? I don't know anybody that crochets. I'll go to the store, get a pattern, see if I can learn from the pattern. Well, most patterns back then always had a guide in the back telling you how to do certain stitches, how to read the patterns, what the abbreviations were. And so I taught myself that way. Yet I didn't dare experiment doing anything myself. I always thought, that takes a lot more brains than I've got. When Amy Lynn was 3, the Extension Service offered a class for master crocheters, which basically is just teaching people how to be teachers and how to read patterns, which is more or less a lost art. And so I was really happy to see that they were going to, emphasize teaching people how to read patterns. And there's just a couple of tricks. It's not really that difficult. After I took that class, then we had to teach 50 hours to qualify for not having that class. Normally a $500 class for a week. And so, but you got 1 hour if you taught one person 1 hour. That was great. So you taught groups and then counted each person that was in the group. Linda Jukes and I taught a 4-H group, and the first 2 lessons we had 12 girls, so we had 24 hours just the first 2 lessons. Thereafter we lost a couple of the girls, so it took a little bit longer, but then I was asked to teach Relief Society group. So had quite a few ladies. I had my 50 hours really quickly. Here again, I still didn't do anything my own design, but most patterns, I've never had a problem reading the patterns and being able to do it. If I found a little bit difficult to understand, I'd work through it. I'm that kind of a learner, hands-on as well as visual. And so it took me a long time. My favorite thing is doing anything that will take less than 3 days is a double-ended hook. Now they call it Tunisian crochet. Before Amy Lynn was born, we had a lady in our ward who her husband made out of a yard-long dowel. He made a double-ended crochet hook. So I learned how to do this kind of crocheting on this, and so you can imagine having to turn that around. You turn it each row so that you have one side is one color and one side, the other side's a different color. And it's very easy to do, and I've decided that's the easiest way to teach people how to do chains and pick up the stitch. I teach a lot of different classes. Generally, it's only 3 or 4 people at the most, but that makes it kind of easier. I have now done enough dolls and bears that they're my favorite things to do. This is a flip-flop doll. This is going to be Sleeping Beauty. And so she's done but her hair and her arms. This is as far as I've gotten with this one. Then when you're doing this, so you have to take that out and you can see better, that you'll join the other body right there. And so you're basically making 2 different dolls, Maleficent. I have to stop and think which characters are which, and it's fairy tales. But, and so I found some black yarn in this thin yarn, and it'll be all dressed in black. Then I've got Red Riding Hood here. And this, I didn't quite have enough red of the small yarn, so we decided to put her in pink and red, and then she'll have the cape. Then her other side is, this will be the wolf in Grandma's clothing. I've made one of these already and sold it, and it has a mob cap, I guess you call it, the sleeping cap that they always wore in old times, and it had big ears, so it's like, and the big snout. Real simple projects. This is a snowball, but somebody also told me this is a water ball. Being a water ball, you just wet it, let it soak in the water for a while, then you can just keep doing it without it bursting. I do scrubbers. I've done these for 5 years now. This is kind of my own design. I do these for the Relief Society birthday gifts in my ward. That's kind of my calling. So that's, and they're washable. It's called scrubby yarn. It's a very thin thread with the hairy parts on it. I put it with the cotton, so it's one strand of one and one of the other. I'm doing magnets now. This is a facial scrub, and so just a circle with a little band across, and be able to scrub your face. This is Dad. I've made Mom and 3 kids. This yarn is called velvet yarn, and this yarn I actually bought at the dollar store in Price, the one over by Lynn's. Velvet. Now I'll show you. This is my rag doll. Oh, here's the mama. I knew I had her somewhere. I don't know where the kids are, but there's Mama. And that, her hair, for the longest time, all I ever did hair was kind of attached it with a stitch and then let it hang. I finally found on Pinterest, here again, I found how they made the buns and the hair. This is one of my bears, my own creation. I've learned to make them many different ones just by how, if I want them a stiff leg or if the floppy. This is something I made. I can't even think. You know Ann Curtis. Okay, Ann Curtis, when she had her last baby, this was that baby's. Because I was Doris's visiting teacher, and she asked me to make a baby dress. And met Joyce in Price, or in St. George one time. Said, do you see Shauna a lot? And she said, well, she's there in Castledale, so I can. She said, I have something for her. And she went home and brought this back, and she says, give this back to her. So now I have a great grandbaby that is due in November that I'm saving that for. I call it my racial doll. Here's my little black girl, and here's my little white girl. You kind of could call it knitting, but it's also the same idea of crocheting. This is called loop yarn, and it's a string of loops, and you measure out how far you want it. So like this is 12 inches, and then you fold back that yarn and pull that loop through the original loop, and just build it for how long you want it. I decided I needed a polar bear. This is the Lovey. Here's my stiff leg doll, or bear. Ideas on flip-flop dolls from fairy tales or movies. This is from Shrek. And I noticed the other day she's only got one arm, so I've got to make another arm. But so here's Fiona as a princess, and here's Fiona the ogre. Oh, this is that velvet yarn in velvet plush, so it's a thicker plush velvet. The beginnings of my bear, and this is made from the plush. So I don't know if you.
So he's waiting for his arms, his ears,
So,
and his
yep.
snout, huh?
So you want to be in a well-lit area, especially when working with dark colors. I made a Winnie the Pooh for Jennifer. I will never use that pattern again because it was the most difficult to understand. As I crocheted it wasn't going right, and it wasn't going right. And it was her Christmas present that year. It was one of those tough years. Lyndon was working at Food Ranch, and so I thought, okay, I'll ask each of the kids what they want. If they want a sweater, slippers, that kind of thing. Jennifer says, I want a Winnie the Pooh if you've got the pattern. Tried working on that thing. Christmas Eve, this bear was still only half done. Geraldine was Jennifer's visiting teacher. Get Jennifer out of the house for a few hours. Oh, I can do that. So she took her, was gone almost a whole day, and I finally made this pattern, made this bear. But yeah, when you're talking about something you're going to stuff, it is better that the stitches are closer. I know when I get to the bottoms here, a lot of times I can tell I've stuffed it too much because I pushed it till the stitches separate. And that depends a lot on the yarn. So if you know that you crochet tighter or looser, you change your hook. If you're too loose, go a smaller hook. And it's okay, like with toys, when you're finishing off, to finish off with a smaller hook to make the stitches go tighter. G is a very common hook size for crochet for most projects. You can basically make toys, even blankets, many different sizes depending on your yarn and the hook size you use. These little flip-flop dolls, the original pattern that I got the idea from called for using the regular red heart yarn with a G hook. I make these little flip-flop dolls with, it's called kobu, and it's a sport yarn. It's a very thin yarn, and a bee hook. And I made what would have been a 12-inch doll into a 6.5-inch doll. So it just, you kind of have to work with what you've got and know how you crochet. I'm kind of a medium. Sometimes my stitches are taller, but they're as wide as they're supposed to be. But sometimes they get to be like a double crochet stitch will be a little bit taller than, like this bear. They were single crochet, but as I worked, seemed like some rows were really short and some were tall. So you just you have to have the experience, and it takes everybody the same amount of time, as long as it takes to get that experience. So, but it's something I recommend as a enjoyment. It's one of those, whatever you decide to do when you're finished with the product, it's just wonderful to see people's eyes light up of what you've done, and especially when it's a gift. So anyway, that's my journey. Now I have a crochet group that meets on Wednesdays, 1 o'clock, and we come. Everybody brings their own projects. We probably gab more than we crochet, but Christine Story, she comes and does Afghans. She's given each of her grandkids an Afghan when they graduate high school. Lorraine comes and does scrubbers and dish rags and baby blankets are the three things that she seems to be always working on. Jan Hansen comes, and right now she's working on an Afghan that's each square, it's like 9 squares across and 9 deep, and each square is a different stitch, different pattern. So that's what she's done, but she's done a lot of thread work. She does edges on pillows and edges on hankies, and she does a beautiful job. Johnny Johansson comes, and she does baby Afghans. I taught all the ladies how to do this double-ended hook, making baby blankets, and Johnny's always got a baby blanket going with her talent. So I love crochet. I know it's not something for everybody, but if you do take it on, generally you find that you will enjoy and that it becomes relaxing. We've done a single crochet, which consists going into the stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull up 2. That's a single. Slip stitch is yarn over and pull through that loop and the stitch. So what it will do is bring it flat right up against a previous stitch. Now to do a double crochet, you yarn over, come on, go into your stitch, come up, yarn over, go through 2 loops, yarn over and go through the final 2. That's a double. Half double, which half double isn't that common, but single and double are probably the most common stitches. Or go through, and this time you've got 3 loops, you yarn over and go through all 3 loops, and that's a half double. Now we do a triple, is yarn over twice, go into your stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over and go through 2, yarn over and go through the next 2, and yarn over and go through the final, and that's a treble. Now when they tell you to finish off in a pattern, generally all you need to do is pull it through, cut it, and pull it all the way through. I would say 2 to 3 inches is a good length to leave it, because then you've got enough that you can weave it back through your work and it's not going to slip out on you. Shell stitch is one of the easiest blanket stitches, as well as an easy edging. So that starts out with a single crochet, yarn over and do a single crochet. Now yarn over, skip 1 stitch or 2, depending. Your patterns a lot of times will say, if you have an even amount of stitches along your row, then you generally want to do skip 2. So then you do 5 double crochets in that next stitch. Those 5 stitches are all done in that same stitch. So you think you don't have room, but it's amazing. It will be. Yarn over and 2 through 2, yarn over through the final 2. Okay, I've got 3 on there right now, so I've got 2 more. When you're through there, then again, the next step is to do a single crochet 1 or 2 stitches away. I only have 1 stitch, so we'll just go into that. But so then when you're through, then you have your single crochet and your 5 doubles and a single crochet, so that it will make your mounds. I use that on to join my dolls' dresses together. So that's the back side. If you can get a better view of that. So it has, just makes it look like you've got a scallop of lace on it. The granny square, that's what I should show you. We can do that really fast here. But don't be afraid to pull half your middle out, because you can always, wrap it, but it is a whole lot better than knotting your yarns up by keep going around.
Right.
Okay, so you make your loop, I chain 4. Sometimes they tell you 3, sometimes they even do just 2. But for a regular granny square, chain 4, slip into that first stitch so that you're forming a circle. Then you chain 3. 1, 2, 3. Now you're going to do 2 double crochet. So you have 3 double crochet, because you count that first chain as your first stitch. Not always, but in a granny square. Okay, chain 2, then do 3 more double crochets. When you do that, then another chain 2. The idea is making a square. That chain 2 forms the corners. When you're through this first round, and that's what you're doing when you're doing a granny square, you're working in what they call rounds instead of rows. When we did the hot pad, when scrubber, when I was working on the scrubber, it was done in rows. Now, when you get your final chain 2, you're going to go into the top of that chain 3. This is where slip stitch comes in. You go into the next stitch, slip, the next stitch, slip, into the chain 2 corner, slip, and chain 3.
Now
Here's
that's
your square.
the complete round.
That's a
And now
complete
you're
round.
starting the second.
So, what the difference between this row now, you do the same 3, then 2, then 3, all in that same space. That's going to be your corner for this round. Then you're going to chain. I like to chain 1 because I like to keep my spaces close together. But chain 2 is generally how patterns will read it. Then when you're making granny squares for, say, an Afghan, you want them all to be the same. So this is when it's important to know how your gauge is. And a gauge is generally done by taking and making so many stitches in it so that you know you've got this many stitches in an inch. End with the chain 2. Here again, go into the top of that chain 3 that you started with. And that finishes the second row.
And that was a slip stitch into that.
And that was a slip stitch into it. So there's, you can keep doing this as big as you need it, as much as you want. You can do a whole Afghan that start from the tiny and, but this is, what the difference is in the center here, you will just do the 3. But you will do 3 and chain 2. So it's always 3 and chain 2. You can do triangles, grannies, hexagon grannies. I've seen an 8-sided, so an octagon, but it's more difficult. So you gotta be counting all the time. Once you've learned how to do your double crochet, granny squares are simple. My problem with granny squares is always putting them together. Hot pads are an easy one. You do a chain, you do single crochets and keep going around till it collapses in on itself, and then when it meets, you sew it up. I encourage people, go look on Pinterest, because there's everything. Crocheting is worth doing.